Hi there, my name is Bob Judson and you're listening to Leading for Life Stories. I'm delighted you're here and I'm really glad to have you on my podcast, and I very, very much hope you enjoy it. Hi everybody, welcome to episode 3. As you might have seen from the trailer I put on LinkedIn and Twitter this week, the episode is all about loneliness of command. People often talk about this, but it's only when you've been in a leadership role of a distinct organization, really, where you're at the pinnacle of it, that you get to really understand what this is all about, and that it is a real thing. And depending on what happens to you, it can be a really big thing. Why? Why is that? Why is it a big thing? Why is this loneliness of command problem a problem at all? Well, simply put, if you've been there, you'll probably know this. You don't have anybody to talk to. You really often feel you don't have anybody to talk to. Your peers are your competitors. Your bosses are potentially assessing your performance, and so confessing to problems might be seen as weakness by them. Your subordinates look up to you, and you don't want to show vulnerability potentially by oversharing things that are bothering you. Even if none of the above is actually true, in my experience at least, leaders often think it is, and they aren't prepared to take that chance. I've had some great bosses over the years, and I'm sure I could have spoken more frankly to many of them, but I never wanted to test the relationship to that degree. Certainly in the military, in a command position, the margin between success and failure, in inverted commas, feels frighteningly thin. And so it tends to make one much more closed than is necessarily healthy in this space. I've also had some great peers and some great team members who I know would have been supportive, but somehow it just wasn't the done thing to overshare. I'll also be the first to admit that I'm a typical man, and I tend to keep things to myself rather than, again in inverted commas, showing weakness. I know that's not a good thing, and I know that it's a very bad male trait, bottling up stuff, not talking about emotions and till it gets too serious and it becomes a real problem. And I've got better over time, but I'm certainly still not perfect. And I've got a few stories, I think, that will help bring this challenge to life for you. The first one is actually deeply personal, and it's not something I've shared widely at all outside my immediate circle of friends. But I think it is valuable in this context to put it in perspective, because I think it demonstrates the point quite well about loneliness of command. Before I get to the punchline, though, I think some context is important. I got married in 2006. It was a second T-shirt for me. I'd been married before. And the end of 2006, when I got married, that was just after my command tour at Coningsby. We moved to a military married quarter at a place called Bushy Heath in Hertfordshire. And in 2007, I then attended 2 key military courses across the whole of that year. For those who are really into the detail, it was the High Command and Staff course and the Royal College of Defence Studies. And I did those kind of back-to-back, overlapped, really. I did the High Command and Staff course through to April and then jumped into a term late into the Royal College of Defence Studies. Great courses, really enjoyable, very important. Learned a lot and still have an incredible network of friends as a result of both of them. But very sadly, almost immediately after my wife and I had got back from our wedding and our honeymoon, we got married out in St. Lucia, my mother was diagnosed with cancer. And we quickly realized that cancer was terminal. It was months, not weeks. And luckily, the fact that I was on courses rather than on more operational work, I was able to spend a good deal of time with her in her final few months. But it was obviously a very challenging start to a new marriage, not least as my lovely wife had never served in the military and so was thrust into a whole new world just at the same time as we were seeing my mother go steadily downhill. And that was obviously an increasing challenge. Mum died in November 2007. And in the January of 2008, I went to Afghanistan for a 9-month operational tour in command of the NATO base at Kandahar in the south of or southeast really of Afghanistan. Huge job, very focused, very long hours, very busy, and I'll talk more about some of the things that come out from that in other podcasts. And I guess what it did do was it allowed me to not think too hard about what had just happened and the fact that I was now an orphan. My father having died when I was very young, my mother having now died as well. I didn't have any brothers and sisters, so suddenly my kind of family was significantly smaller, and I suppose I parked it. I didn't really think about it in any way, shape, or form. With my mum's house, we'd literally moved the valuable stuff out, locked it up, left it, and I knew I'd get to it when I got back, and that was going to be fine, and there was no issue with that. We then got to a point early in 2008 where, much to our surprise, my wife fell pregnant. We fairly quickly discovered that she was pregnant with twins, which was even bigger surprise, as you'd imagine. Having had no kids, to suddenly then be looking at the prospect of having two was an interesting moment. And all was proceeding well. We were delighted about it. We were absolutely thrilled that this was going to happen, and it was an amazing turn of events. But the pregnancy didn't go as planned. I won't go into too much detail. I just don't think it's appropriate. But we ended up with, or my wife ended up with, some quite serious complications really right through. And we had some amazing, I have to say, amazing care from the healthcare system, who looked after us really, really well. And it looked as though for a point things were actually going to be okay, and we were quite encouraged. But then at about literally just after the 24-week point, then things started to go rapidly downhill. And the bottom line of all of this was that our two twin baby daughters were born at just after 24 weeks. Now, anybody that has got children will appreciate that's way, way, way too early. And premature babies are going to struggle to survive at that age. But they do. Some of them do. Sadly, ours didn't. They lasted just over 24 hours, and then both of them, within minutes of each other, died. And they died of actually septicemia, which they acquired. We didn't know this at the time, but obviously they'd acquired that during the pregnancy. And that was obviously traumatic enough. But what was doubly traumatic was then about 2 or 3 days later, and perhaps I'll go into some of the more detail because there's some interesting other things around this. 2 or 3 days later, my wife was then rushed into hospital herself with septicemia. And 5 days in intensive care, and she made it. But she made it thanks to, as the doctor said to us at the time, my wife said to the doctor, thank God I was okay. And he said, no, thank antibiotics, you were okay, because she literally had the strongest antibiotics known to man, and turned around. And luckily turned around in a way that she didn't have any significant lasting effects from that at all. So she knows how incredibly fortunate she was, and we both really share that kind of emotion that it was an incredibly fortunate time in the outcome of all of that, on the back of what had been an utter tragedy. But for me, the interesting thing was, of course, this all happened. This was a huge life event. We'd gone from crest of a wave to the bottom of a deep trough very, very quickly. My wife was clearly going to take some time to recover from all of this. It was a definite drama in that sense. And I was back at work. I was in work in my next job, having come back from Afghanistan. I was running a directorate in the Ministry of Defence. I was looking after all of our targeting and information operations work in the MOD. And it was another big job. It was nowhere near as many people I was looking after, but the responsibility was huge. And we were servicing stuff that was going on operations, where we were providing the targeting directives and so on for that, and a lot of other things besides. So it was a particularly interesting and very busy role. And I did pretty much what I'd done with my mum. I kind of buried the issue. I didn't talk about it at work. I didn't talk to anybody because I just didn't feel I had anybody I could talk to at work about it. And whether that was above me, below me, around me, a few people knew because I'd obviously had a bit of time off. And so there are a few people who are aware of it. In that situation, as most people will relate to, you often find people don't talk to you about it because they don't want to kind of broach the subject, I suppose. They don't feel it's appropriate. They don't want to expose themselves and also you, I guess. And so they just don't tackle it. They don't come to you and they don't discuss it. And for you, or in my case, for me, I just didn't feel I wanted to talk about it. I didn't feel I needed to. I didn't feel the need to share excessively about it, and wasn't going to be particularly cathartic or helpful for me to do that. So I didn't. And when I look back on it, I think that was a really bad thing to do. I don't think it helped me do my job better. I think probably the opposite. I think I should have been a bit more open. It probably would have shown a more human face of me in some ways to some of the people working for me at the time. And I think they would probably have been both obviously very surprised, but I think they would also have been tremendously supportive. And so I do kind of regret that I did handle it in the way I did. And at the same time, I think I probably should have and could have been mentally at least much more supportive directly at home. And I think all of this comes back to the loneliness of command point. I was in the leadership of an organization where all the things I said at the beginning were true. I had a peer group who were kind of competitors for me, and I'm in a job where it's a competitive world. You need to do well. You want to get promoted. You need to be delivering, and showing too much ankle, if you like, too much weakness in this space was just not going to be where I would have gone with it. And I therefore bottled it up and it ran on for a while like that. And I don't think it ever really massively affected my job and my performance in my job. But when I just look back, I think I probably could have and should have handled it differently. So I guess, what can I offer you in terms of advice from a leadership point of view? Given everything that happened to me, the experiences I had, what do I draw from it? What are the lessons I bring? First, I think be more open. Don't bottle it up. I know it's easy to say that. It's probably much more difficult to do in the moment. But as a leader, you have got people that you will be able to talk to, that trust you, that rely on you, that believe in you. And they're going to be good people to talk to. And find one or two of them. You've always got people who are closer than others. Find the close ones. Think about who are the close ones that you can actually bring inside the tent and have that honest discussion, because in some ways I wish I had done that. I wish I'd been in a position where I felt I had more people I could talk to and could have shared with in a way that would just have lessened the burden probably slightly. I don't think no miracles would have occurred, but just from taking it back to the workplace and hiding behind it and ignoring it and just compartmentalizing it. I think if you're good at compartmentalizing, and I certainly am, I can do that pretty well, then I think that is helpful, but I'm not sure it's a good tactic to employ generally. And clearly some people are much less good at that, and therefore they find it very hard not to kind of bring it back to the workplace, or indeed take stuff from the workplace back into the home life. And therefore, if you're in that space, then kind of don't. You find people to talk to, share stuff within the bounds of what you can, and occasionally you won't be able to for confidentiality reasons, etc. But if you can, then try and find a way to do that, because it'll help you, and it will ease what is undoubtedly a burden that risks becoming bigger and bigger and bigger if you let it. In busy jobs where you have got lots and lots of stuff to do, the challenge is obviously making sure you don't let the plate get too full until it overflows, and then you're in trouble, because at that point you start losing control of what's gone on. So you need to find a way to avoid that. And I know that probably sounds terribly easy and in some ways maybe not particularly profound, but it is as simple as that. It is as simple as share more, talk more, find people that you can actually talk to. And those are the key things that I think you need to do in those kind of positions. If you bottle everything up, it will come home to bite you. Eventually, it's going to come home to bite you. And it might be years downrange that actually happens. And you do, like I've just done, look back and go, I actually wish I'd done that a bit differently. So if that's a lesson I can give to you, then I hope it's helpful. There's two other related stories that I think are useful to share. That aren't about me, but they're from the other side of the telescope, as it were, here. Because I think it's easy to look at this from the leadership point of view, about you in a leadership position. I'm now going to turn it around slightly and look at it from the being led in a team. And a lot of you, hopefully listening to this podcast, will actually be in that space. You'll be part of a team. You'll have people you're working for. And you'll know them. You'll know them quite well. You'll have a lot of experience with what their characters are like and so on. And so what I'm going to say now, I think, should resonate a little bit, because as a team member, you also have an opportunity and maybe even a responsibility to turn around and look after your leadership when you see that something is not quite right. And there are two instances that really sort of still sit with me today that I think were fascinating for me in this space. One was a long, long time ago when I was on a Jaguar squadron. We were on operations. We were out doing operations over Bosnia. We were based in southern Italy. And I was working for a guy at the time who was absolutely lovely. He was a fantastic chap. I still get on very well with him to this day. And he was hugely genial, gregarious, fun-loving guy who always was just cheerful. You didn't have a day when he wasn't cheerful. And he obviously was a hard taskmaster as well. He had high standards and he wanted to make sure we delivered everything we were supposed to do. But he was a cheerful, happy guy. And I detected over a course of, I suppose, 2 or 3 days, really, I was just talking to him. I was seeing him, obviously, many times a day, every day, because we were living, in cheek by jowl, really, in a hotel in southern Italy doing operational flying every day. And he just wasn't himself, and he clearly wasn't himself. And so I eventually said to him, we were sat at dinner one night, I said, hey, can I have a chat with you after dinner? I just got something I want to talk about. And he said, yeah, sure. So we went up to his hotel room. And I said, I just came straight out with it. I said, look, boss, what's wrong? You're not you. I know you. I've known you for a while now. You're just not yourself. You're obviously, there's something the matter, and I just want to make sure you're okay. And what I had not expected was what then happened. I ended up with probably a good hour, maybe 2 hours of conversation, really one-way conversation, where he just unloaded on me a lot of stuff, a whole lot of stuff that he had clearly been carrying. And a lot of it was in isolation, relatively small issues and things that perhaps he certainly wouldn't have normally worried about. But the accumulation, one more straw on the camel, then another straw, then another straw. And eventually, of course, that straw breaks the camel's back, to use the expression. And he was just becoming more and more tense because he just felt he had no outlet for all of this stuff. And suddenly I was the outlet. I had uncapped the shaken up bottle of Coca-Cola and got the full force of him offloading all of this in a pretty rapid fire way. And it wasn't as though I could do anything about most of the things he was talking about. There were a few that obviously there were things we could discuss and take away, but a lot of these were things that I don't even remember the detail now, and it doesn't matter. But it was just stuff that was just obviously on his mind that he had not managed to shake off and declutter, and that was becoming more and more of a cumulative problem for him. And he felt that was now his opportunity to offload to me in a way that was clearly for him cathartic. For me, it was quite shocking. I wasn't ready for that, I suppose. I probably should have been in hindsight. But it all came back again to this. He'd had no one. He'd had no one at the top that he felt he'd go up to, and he didn't have anybody in the team either that he really felt he could lean on. The next day, very next day, he came up to me, he took me to one side in this instance, and he was extremely grateful and said it had made a huge difference, and he was particularly thankful because I think it had just allowed him to vent for a while, to get rid of all that stuff. And actually then returned him very much back to normal very quickly. That isn't always going to be the case. Some of the time the issues are more serious than that, and they can't just be uncorked, let loose, and then it's done. But a lot of the time that might well be the case. And if you're in a position where you're in a team and you see someone you're working for that isn't themselves for some reason, then just find an opportunity to explore that, obviously in a suitably private way and in a suitably subtle way that gives them the opportunity not to engage if they choose not to engage. I think we're better at this now. I think mental health is a subject that is obviously talked about all the time, and people are very aware of mental health risks and challenges, and therefore that's helpful. But at the same time, it's not something that is still easy for some people to do. The final example that I had is a similar one, but again, to bring it sort of into stark relief. When it was a bit later on now in my time on the Jaguar Force, where I was a squadron commander now, and I was working at RAF Coleshaw, commanding a Jaguar squadron there. And the station commander was and is a very, very good friend of mine. I'd known him for a very long time, since we were in Germany together. Super chap, really, really great guy. And we tragically, not my squadron, but one of the other squadrons, lost an aeroplane with a fatality. The pilot was killed, and it was a long way away. They were on detachment over in Alaska, so literally the other side of the world. And the pilot was my next door neighbor. And I knew him very well. I knew his wife extremely well. And it was absolutely tragic for them, obviously. But it's also an incredibly difficult thing when you're the one that has to turn around and bring the bad news to that door. And in this particular instance, I heard earlier in the evening that we'd lost an aeroplane. At that point, it wasn't clear whether it was confirmed that the pilot was dead. And some hours later, it was confirmed that the pilot was dead. And this was by that stage pretty late. And the routine in the military, if that happens, is that somebody appropriately senior goes and breaks the news to the next of kin. Obviously, if it's on the base and that's the station commander, or in the station commander's absence, one of the senior executives who would go and do that. And the families all know that if you see someone coming up your drive wearing their number one uniform, their best uniform, that probably isn't going to be a good day. And I heard a car pull up. It was early hours of the morning. I couldn't sleep very well for obvious reasons. Early hours of the morning, I heard a car pull up pretty much outside my house. And I got up and I looked out the window, and sure enough, it was the station commander who was going to break the news to the widow that her husband had been killed. And I watched him go in, and obviously I didn't see or hear anything that went on inside the house, but then I saw him come out. And I just watched a figure that I knew very, very well, who in that particular moment looked shattered. There's no other way to describe it. And I went downstairs, having already thrown some clothes on because I figured this kind of might happen, opened my door and said, "Do you want a drink?" And he came in and had a drink. And I think that, again, we didn't say a lot, we didn't do a lot. We talked a bit about it and what had actually happened, but there was not much that needed to be said, because these things happen in the flying world. You do lose people occasionally. It's fortunately much rarer now than it used to be. And in that moment, it made a huge difference to him, and I know it did, that just gave him a sort of crutch to lean on, as it were, in a moment when he actually needed it. And again, I come back to that. If you're in a team thing, and may not be anything like that serious, but you know that something has happened, then being supportive, being helpful, being there for the people that work for you, but also being there for the people that you work for is really, really important. I'm sure there'll be people listening to this podcast that can relate to this in a pretty strong way. I'm sure there'll be people who haven't encountered this. There may well be people that actually have and have handled it very differently. I'd be really interested in feedback from people on this, because I think it is an area that mutual help is good. It is useful to exchange views and have a good understanding of how to do it. So definitely do share on this, and in your normal environment, share as well, because I think that's really, really important. That's kind of all I wanted to do this week. I just wanted to talk about that loneliness and command thing. Next week is a big week, because I told you I was going to introduce guests to the podcast, and next week's episode will be the first of those guests. And it promises to be a very big bang start, as my first guest is General David Petraeus. Now, many of you will be very familiar with David Petraeus, particularly if you're in military circles or actually just widely look at American senior players. But for those who aren't familiar with him, have a quick look at his Wikipedia entry. It'll take you some time to read it, though, because he's got an incredible encyclopedic career behind him. He's a huge figure in the US military and had an amazing 6 commands as a general officer. And then subsequently, after the time he was in the military, he went on to be director of the CIA. He's in business these days. He works for KKR as a partner and the chair of their global institute. And he's a great man to talk to. And I had a fantastic interview with him. There are tons of really great leadership lessons that he brings out in the session. So really hope you tune in to enjoy it. I absolutely know you won't be disappointed. It's a lot longer than these short individual podcasts, so probably do it in bite-sized chunks, but I hope you're going to love it. If you like what I'm doing on these podcasts, then please subscribe. Please leave me a nice review. That would be really helpful. It all helps to boost me up the ratings. Please feel free to send me feedback. Direct messages on LinkedIn or Twitter are fine, and or ping me on an email if you really fancy doing that as well. And I very, very much value your thoughts. But that's all for now. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a great week, and it's great to have been with you as always.